I'm Eleanor Young, editor of the RIBA Journal. I've got a vested interest in talking about offices, as most of us have who are in offices, but mine in particular is absolutely dreadful acoustically. We're due for a big refit, but I think it would have been very easy to retrofit some of those quite simply and quickly, and I'm surprised that's not done more often, because it can bring a sense of warmth and resonance to a place which doesn't require looking after plants even, just getting that right. So I think it's a very quick win, and I think the findings of your poll, which we'll refer to through the session, I think I've got some of the statistics here. I think that bears it out that acoustics are a particular issue.
Graham Weinstone, Associate Director at GPAD Architects. We're based in London. The majority of our work is workplace design, so we have a huge interest in terms of what we produce and the process we take along with clients. And I think at the moment we're obviously very interested in where it's going, and we're taking a lot of time in our own, within our own office environment to research that as well. So that's what we're here today to discuss further.
Laura.
Hi, I'm Lara Millward. I run my own business. I'm a neuro leadership coach, which means I'm a brain-based coach. I look at it from a neuroscience perspective on people's behaviour and performance at work. So I coach leaders and teams and their high-performing habits.
I'm Rob Smith. I'm an architect and director at TP Bennett. I've been at TP Bennett for about 15 years now. Predominantly, again, similar work in producing workplaces, amongst other things. Working on a scale of different projects in workplace fit out, and equally just kind of looking to sort of bring some of that experience to today's discussion, talk about new trends and sort of what we do with our end users and things like that.
I'm Derek Camas-Croom. I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Reading, but I also work with the British Council for Offices on their ECG, the Technical Affairs Committee and their Research Committee. And besides some teaching, also in research. I'm looking at the moment on the impact of plants and greenery in office spaces, and some on schools actually, but today it's more confined to offices.
I'm Ben Hancock, Managing Director of Oscar Acoustics. We've been around for 47 years now, and I've been here for 20 years of that. And we specialise in acoustic decorative finishes.
And as we know, sometimes hiding them behind other finishes.
Yes.
So let's start by talking about the bigger picture, and I'm going to come to you, Rob, in a second, to look at some of the trends in workplace design. I think, and actually in kind of the things that have happened post-pandemic with workplaces, which is a very big shift in many ways. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that there's a shortage of really premium space, but there's an oversupply of offices in general. We've got hybrid working, and all the things that means. And I've got a whole list of things here because I did my homework. But Rob, you've probably got a better idea from working with Deutsche Bank and current projects that you're starting on, as we talked about earlier, of some of the things that you see happening in workplace design, where there are changes, where there are kind of evolutions.
I think it's kind of post-pandemic, we're seeing a sort of shift of quality over quantity. First of all, I think you have a lot of people that have potentially been reluctant to come back to the office, and certain people may have enjoyed the aspect of working from home and how that introduction to their sort of day-to-day life has improved their work-life balance. But I think one of the things that we're seeing now is from the end user, from our clients, is what can we do to encourage those people to come back naturally rather than a mandatory kind of process. I mean, we hear there's sort of people that are very relaxed with their approach to that, and others that are very firm, and there is an expectation that people are back in the office 5 days a week. I think there needs to be a balance in order to be able to strike, to get the benefit from that work-life balance. I think it needs to maintain.
And what does that mean in terms of what you're asked to do in terms of design? I mean, it's a very big ask. Can you just fix this social problem which we have with
It's a challenge. I think the main thing that we try and do is provide variety of spaces. We try and provide an element of that sort of feeling of home, but without, basically providing different spaces where different activities can happen. I think the main draw from, even colleagues that I work with, the main draw is the sort of social aspect of it. So creating spaces within a workplace that provide the opportunity for people to come together, either from working collaboratively or a social aspect. But then we recognise the fact that not everyone wants to work like that, and I think certainly in some of the smaller projects, some of the smaller floor plates that we get in those smaller offices, it's a challenge to be able to balance those different activities. We can't just simply have a social area and a working hub next to each other, because from acoustics mainly, but there are other aspects in terms of behaviours and things like that.
I saw a nice phrase which said avoiding collaboration in isolation. So instead of don't just go off and find a place to collaborate, but somehow do it within the space. Do it, why do you have to stand up to go and do something every time? I mean, obviously it's probably quite good for you to stand up, but isn't it better that you can do it where you are and just do it locally rather than finding a space, spend 10 minutes booking somewhere, all this kind of thing?
Agreed, yeah. I think we had a bit of a startling realisation the other day that we had a team of about 4 or 5 people. We all jumped on a call, and then the penny dropped that we were all in the same room as each other. And then we went, let's just be in person together somewhere. But
and that took 45 minutes to organise.
Exactly, and I think, but we did have that moment of, but where do we go?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's those sort of things. You want that to be a natural kind of, we could do this, we could do that. Okay, that one.
Yeah.
Rather than we went hunting for a meeting room for 10 minutes. Whereas it's things like that where you just want natural opportunities for collaboration to happen, and I think that goes back to that behaviours in terms of if your office facilitates those kinds of collaboration and coming together, the decision to come into the office is a lot easier, and I think people are going to want to come in rather than being told to come in.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So it's all about collaboration, but being able to hear yourself. Ben, you look at this quite a lot. I mean, workplace is an important sector for you, isn't it? So what do you see people asking for, or what do you see the trends emerging?
I mean, you mentioned home from home. That's what I think employers are trying to create now. They're trying to create more comfortable spaces that people want to come to. They're trying to lure people back to the office rather than doing the Elon Musk approach of, right, you're all coming back in, that's that. So, if you can, we've seen it ourselves here. So when we moved here, we had people that were working at home and now coming in 4 to 5 days a week now. And it's much better for collaboration, but also, if it's all open plan and you can hear there's a conversation going on and that what they're talking about isn't quite correct, you can chip in and you can solve so many problems.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Any other thoughts on some of the big trends? I mean, Lara, you must.
I was just listening, and I concur with what you're saying. It's very much focusing on the how, really, and not the what. It's how it's communicated. Let's invite in rather than lure. Let's invite in. Let's have an adult-to-adult conversation. I think what I like to talk about, the leader shift in behaviours now. We're not going from organisation, parent-child, you must come in, even though some traditional industries are saying you've got to come in 5 days a week. We're trying to shift that to an adult-to-adult conversation. I want to invite you in, and these are the benefits. no habit gets ingrained unless we identify the reward. So let's invite in and communicate why the spaces are good, why collaboration is good, why we want to socially connect with each other because it's better for the brain, and we come up with creative ideas and innovate. Maybe there is time for home where you can do your deep work and your focus work, and maybe we redefine what the office or the workspace is for. It's actually for creativity, innovation, idea solving, all those other things which you can't do in isolation. And I think there's a place here for leaders and organisations to invite in and to label the reward.
I would add on to that as well, learning with the office environment. I think certainly people in because that's a better place to grow in your career. But I think for me the large trend that has changed, I'd say, is amenity. And I'd say that's much more in the macro scale than down to the micro. In terms of both how office locations are picked, I think when people look at building, they're looking at what, as you would a residential area, what's in the area, what's local to them, what does it provide the tenants, to then finding what that gap is for landlords in terms of what they can provide that might draw people into make this a state-of-the-art building. The sort of landlords are looking at things and they've been trying loads of different bits, yoga spaces on the rooftops, running spaces, and a lot of this now has been looked at with the BCO, I believe, in terms of consultations as well with office users of what they want and what has been successful and what hasn't been successful. But I think the largest drive has certainly been making an offering that's just more than a standard building and a standard floor plate that you go to sit at a desk. I think there's a much wider context to it.
Yeah. Beyond the floor plate is a lovely way of thinking about it, actually, because it sort of reminds you that often you are just essentialising. You're just going, okay, what's at that space, rather than thinking about the breadth of the offer. But you're saying it is in many people's minds.
It is.
It's not something you can always deliver as an architect or as a designer.
I think it's all about conversation in terms of the landlord's vision for the building. They might have a very limited vision in which they just want it to refurbish it or make a new one that's very simple. I think those that are more far-sighted are looking at more extreme solutions where they're looking where they can cut back, lose floor area to make terraces, to make better facilities, to have a restaurant on the ground floor, to have rentable spaces, so they can actually add into the spaces the tenants have. And I think all of that has a definite drive to create something special for people to go to.
Yeah.
I think COVID made us think a lot more deeply about many issues we often take for granted. And all of the issues you've just spoken about, of course, give you a more flexible attitude towards your work cycle for the day. The assumption that you work best between 9 and 5 is way out of the window. Some people work very well during the night, for example. But what I would like to emphasize is the impact of the environment. We saw that, first of all, infection rates caused us to analyze our ventilation systems. And they weren't as good as we perhaps thought they were. It made us rethink. And that involves not just the air systems, the mechanical systems, but the geometry of spaces and how we space people out and layout. So health and well-being, moving on, became an issue. And we realized that so much talk about comfort, but comfort isn't necessarily what you always want. It's more dynamic thing. When you look out of a window, for example, your brain has a micro break from your work situation. And as we're realizing from the work from neuroscience coming into architecture, pouring to that how we work with the brain during our workday needs to be thought about much more deeply. For example, if you're napping in the office or you're daydreaming, this may be a very creative thing because often your creativity is very high in those things. So it's really turned health and well-being upside down, really. And rather than talk about comfort, I would like to sort of suggest we talk more about flourish. And this is a multi-sensory idea, which combines accepting that there are physical and subjective factors in the environment, things you can describe easily in numbers, and those that aren't. There's the human emotion. As much as you may try to keep emotion away, emotion is always involved in your decision to some degree or other. It may be low level, maybe that. So there's emotion, and then there's the economics. The economics. If your environment is bad, your staff retention rates might be difficult, and absenteeism might decrease, and so on, all of that, all those economic kind of impacts. So those three things together make what I call the flourish model. And I think if we look at this in this systematic way, rather than just glue on to comfort all the time, we might do better. People like personal control of the environment, for example. That's one thing. And what I call is sparkle layer. We need more sparkle in the environment.
I think we've got it here. That's Ben's brought his sparkle. Or maybe you're not talking about glittery stuff.
Well, I think if people are going to come back to the office and that they want a more seductive or attractive or whatever, alluring environment, and that's part of the story as well. But health and well-being, multi-sensory impacts, I think, are going to, and this is going to affect the responsibility of organizations for the health of their employees. And of course now people are walking around using wearables to measure things and so on, so there's a lot more measurement as well going on.
That link between physical and mental being so important now. And if we're thinking about, every organisation, if we think about an athlete gets up, they want to be 1% better every day. If we think about organisations wanting better performance out of people, then let's work with the mind and the body, intrinsically linked, to help those people perform better. How are we fueling performance? And what you've beautifully described, your 3 E's of the flourish model, environment, economics, lovely. And it's just so important because we want the brain to work well.
Yes.
So how do we? With micro breaks, with less sound, better temperatures, well-being breaks, access to light, being able to walk out the office, have a walking meeting, so much better for the brain, 15% more blood flow to the brain, all these things.
Views out of the window.
Views out of the window, yeah. Allow yourself to mind wander when you come to insight, only when the mind is wandering. Lovely. Flourish model. Brilliant.
So that is your model, isn't it, Derek? I mean, I think we just talked about productivity, and I've just got some of those figures from the Oscar Acoustics survey. 70% of employees said that their return to the office and optimal productivity was not supported by their employer. And 3% say there isn't an office design. Only 3% saying there wasn't an office design in the process. I don't think I've written that right. Anyway, not many office redesigns in going on. So lots of people feeling that they're not getting that support for all those things that you two have listed, which are, and I think we can all feel them humanly. Yes, you can say, yes, those things are something that I feel naturally would be good for me. I don't know if it'd be good for my team members. No, I don't know if they should have a break. But why aren't, maybe you've got some insight into this, Lara, why aren't employers doing that? Why aren't employers supporting that level of productivity?
I think some are. I think it's a really differing attitude across different industries. What I'm seeing, some of the more traditional industries, finance, where they are, it's an edict, you're in 5 days a week and crack on, and this is the way it's always been done. It's about high productivity, presenteeism, long hours, because that's the way it's always been done. And then I see other industries, particularly media, the more, I suppose, artistic industries, actually opening their eyes to making well-being front and center. Because creativity is so important in their industry, then maybe there's more focus on when we allow the mind to be creative. Maybe there's a bit more liberal. I don't know, I'm guessing because I don't actually know. But that's what I'm seeing in different industries' approach. But I do think some are. And there's many more offices that are creating the collaborative spaces and then the hubs for for when you need to do individual work. I do see it happening. I'm sure you do you?
Yes, but I think what we're missing is what was Rob touched on earlier, the diversity of spaces and particularly quiet spaces. And I think from our office suffers from this as well. We have collaboration, which is great. We have places people can join and meet and discuss ideas. But I think a lot of people, and why the allure of working from home is so nice, is to have that moment of quiet space, retreat. Same on Zoom calls, we're having so many meetings. I think my preference is to have meetings in person. Doesn't always happen. A lot of them are on Zoom or on Teams. And within those, people are sat in the office at different workstations, they can overhear each other, there's a difficult sound quality and concentration and focus, and it's very tiring. And I think that's what's lacking at the moment in terms of design.
I mean, you and Rob are probably seeing quite a lot of places where people are doing forward thinking and saying, how do we create collaboration spaces, quiet spaces, social spaces. Have you ever come across projects in the last few years where really you're doing business as usual? It's just like, we just need a refit because it's looking a bit grubby. Let's just do the same as.
Do you want to feel that one, Rob, or shall I?
I want one from each of you, or more than one if there is more than one.
I'll go first then. Yes, absolutely. A lot of them are business
Oh,
as usual.
really? And they're actually putting money into it?
They put money into it, and it's quite difficult to persuade people that this isn't the way to go. That people have gone home for a reason. That office, occupancy rates have lowered. So that people are less interested in office space unless it has a very special, unique selling point. However, that's a mindset that I think will eventually change because market demands will eventually persuade them that other buildings are renting, theirs aren't. And I think they have to evolve.
Okay, so that's a landlord experience that you've had rather than a tenant experience.
I think tenants for me are more far-sighted. I think they tend to engage better with their workforce, and I think they tend to understand better. They don't always, communicate well with them, but they are trying to do that more in terms of, and particularly for like diversity and inclusion, what people need, what requirements people have within the spaces. So I think when we're doing new fit outs, we're seeing a better idea of what the space could be and what it's for.
Yeah.
But that's not always. Sometimes we do have to prompt people. Have you done this? Have you gone through this process? Have you thought about this? Are you sure you don't want that? To try and expand the brief and horizons.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I think we've been blessed with a lot of great clients in recent years that do want to push the envelope and do want to look forward, as Graham says, and that gives us the opportunity to sort of work within budgets and challenge people and kind of open their eyes to new trends and things like that potentially they hadn't considered. I think there are people there are clients that come to us and they do have an idea of what they want in mind, and in some cases that is, stick to things as they are. We're just going to refresh it, but even within those realms, we can still challenge things as architects and designers. And I think we know that there are potentially low impact introductions.
Low impact or low cost?
Low cost, sorry.
That's what you want, low impact.
Thank you for keeping me honest. There's potentially low cost,
high impact
items that we can potentially introduce.
Oh, go on, tell us what's a low cost, high impact?
Well, I think it's more a case of, again, post-pandemic, there's more emphasis on agile working, there's more emphasis on desk sharing, sorry. So making those working ratios work a bit harder, potentially, to respond to the behaviours of how staff come into the office.
Sorry, just explain the ratios.
Sorry, so basically with a desk sharing ratio that potentially you may have sort of like an 8 or 10, so for 8 desks you'd have 10 people sharing those.
Right.
So across the larger projects, obviously that accumulates, and
Is an 8 to 10 is standard, is it?
That
sounds.
It's varied a lot since. That's probably one of the more traditional metrics from previous.
Right.
I think some of the working ratios have been pushed a little bit harder as well since pandemic, to respond to those behaviours of how many people are coming into the office.
Right.
So you end up having that sort of surplus of space, which, there's, as I say, there's kind of things that we can introduce in terms of choice and variety that make that space more appealing to be in than being at home potentially.
Yeah.
And those could be, that could be collaborative furniture, it could be, pods.
What's that, Lego, you build it together?
They would. I think it's also the sort of furniture industry have kind of really played into this, and they've really leaned into this, and they've been playing around with the products that they offer. So we see a wide variety of different bits of modular furniture as well. So you can have kind of relaxed spaces that you can collaborate in.
Yeah.
So it gives you that sort of homely feel. But we can keep things very traditional at the same time, and you can have fixed elements like pods, phone booths, to give you that variety. So the things that your office was missing kind of pre-pandemic, there's now, if done correctly, there is a sort of surplus of space that can be utilised for all of these nice to haves and these add-ons and things, which in turn is hopefully improving that office experience.
If I could just put my BCO hat on.
British Council offices,
British Council offices. I don't know if any of you use the BCO data. We've just issued the new FITAB guide. And in health and well-being, a lot of these things we're speaking about now, which are a little bit extra, a bit different to before, as our understanding has changed, are in the new FITAB guide. So you will see there's a section on health and well-being linked to sustainability, of course, in the guide. So I think the scene is changing. I think, you mentioned the pods, the restoration pods, recognizing that people do need breaks. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're unproductive. It may mean the opposite, that you're actually more productive if you respect your brain a little bit more.
I think that's the other thing that potentially, like clients and users have become a bit more educated on. I think potentially there's maybe a fear of having quiet space. It was a place to go missing, effectively. Whereas I think people see the value in, actually that's an important part of my day, to be able to remove myself, and whether it's taking a call or whether it's some solo working, that I just need to focus on one task. I think the understanding and the trust is there from
I've been thinking that the ratios are problematic, because when we're in the office, somebody goes to a meeting room and they take the whole meeting room for one Teams call. So everybody's on a Teams call for, say, a third of the day, even when they're in the office. So that means they all want a meeting room. So everybody wants to have a team meeting. So you have a team meeting, you have to go to a different space for that. You need an extra space for that. So everything, if we've got extra space, but in London particularly, that's still at a premium. It's still based on, land values effectively. Why can't, and this is kind of playing to the concept of collaboration, not in isolation, why can't you do some of those things right where you're sitting? And that's where I think acoustics is really important, because you should definitely be able to take a phone call at your seat. We used to have phone calls. Do you remember? In the old days, we had phone calls before Teams. We had them, and there's no reason why you can't take a Teams call at your desk, except for acoustics. So
I think there's a mixture there of two things. So acoustically, there's an issue with the office itself. You need to feel comfortable in that environment, having the conversation. You don't want the noise levels to get to a point where it's a problem. Also, you need a decent headset. I've got one now that if I move the mic up here, nobody can hear me, because it's that good.
Not 20 quid off Amazon.
It wasn't. No, it's a bit of a game changer, that one. I find that where you've got customers unprepared to spend the money on these refits and the acoustic treatment, it's where they don't realise how badly it's actually hitting them in the pocket.
I just read out those figures. That's amazing. Top 3 impacts of loud noise are difficult concentration, 47%, irritation, which is actually definitely a bad thing for productivity, 36%, and stress, which you were saying has an impact on good decision making, among other things, 30%. Yeah, which has been consistent since 2019.
That's it. So to give an example, if restaurateurs, they seem to think that noise is atmosphere. But what they don't actually realise is that it's costing them 25% of their business. 25% of people, according to research, will never go back to a noisy restaurant. So that means they're constantly having to get more people in. They're not even growing the business, they're just trying to stay afloat. So an office is, you wouldn't go back to an office. You probably need to go back to you wouldn't go back to your restaurant. You probably need to go back to your office.
Oh no, I don't think that's good. I'm not going to give that job a go.
But these people can become irritable, unproductive, and actually even toxic. So that can change the atmosphere within a company quite drastically, and it's all about just getting that right. It makes a big difference.
I remember in the 60s, I started some work on the Bureau Landschaft offices, and at that time, some offices were too quiet.
Right.
Mainly because the ceiling heights were quite low, and there was an excessive use of absorbent material, I think, and there was quite a few where it can go the other way.
I totally agree with you. So in this place we've deliberately done that, but we've done it so that we can have, we've got an amazing sound system, which you might have noticed earlier throughout the building. So we can now have music, or we had bird song as well, until there was one bird that was slightly irritating and it was getting on our nerves. But because we've got the music in the background, but with the acoustic treatment as well, it means everything's crystal clear, the music's crystal clear, but the music's just there in the background, making it a bit more comfortable for people to have a conversation on the phone, because you don't want to feel paranoid.
You don't want to be the only
that other
voice that you
people
can hear. Right.
Yeah, I think that's why I used to, especially when we mentioned sort of the best place to learn. I think that there's a very fine line when you're sort of new to the office or new to the business, that I didn't want people you feel a bit shy about people being able to hear you on the phone, but then it gives you that encouragement that somebody's going, yep, that's fine. And you can, as you said at the beginning, if you know that there's something that's maybe going a bit derailed, or no, that's incorrect, you've got that kind of connection.
You can fine tune the acoustics as well, so it's not one set depth. You can you decide what you want to achieve acoustically, and then we just keep spraying. So you can put 10 mil on, you can put 70 mil on, and we can achieve absolutely anything you like. We did it in a restaurant where he was so nervous about losing what he called the atmosphere, and we reduced the material depth down to the brief, and on the opening night it was tiled floors and everything, and you could sit in your chair and talk to your partner just about. It was right on the edge. Personally, I would have gone for a little bit more, but it was what they wanted, and it's a successful restaurant. I can't argue with that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? These fine margins now we're into in terms of self-actualization. People are at a performance level already in our modern world, and all these small things that are heightening our ability to perform in what is already a population who report stress, financial, political, climate, all sorts of things, workload that are going on in their world. Reported levels of stress are high anyway. We're the most distracted we've ever been. Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, emails, text messages, the brain, and then working as well. There's so much that people are dealing with. We're now moving into how we can make that 1% difference, or help the brain to function, where we want actually higher performance at work than we've ever wanted, yet we're dealing with an already stressed, oversensitive, potentially irritated population, and we know that long-term stress on the brain reduces cognitive capacity. So we're moving into, I was fascinated to hear about the spray that you use, moving into these areas where we can make those small differences to well-being and to our workforce.
Could it be as significant as putting your phone out of sight? That's the question.
Yeah, to deep focus now, they say as soon as your phone is on and near you, your cognitive ability reduces. So the only way through that is when you need deep focus, airplane mode and out of sight is the only way to get that deep focus. Otherwise you're thinking, I'm missing out on messages, I need to know, all of those feelings.
But I think that again, something like the pandemic and the introduction of Teams into the workplace in the scale that it's at, it's similar to what you were saying, Derek, like having those micro breaks. Now, the demand on people's time is such that, my diary is most often back to back throughout the day. You don't even have that travelling time between offices and meeting rooms now, where you used to be like, well, I can't, the earliest I can do a meeting is 12 because I actually need to have some lunch. I need to get to the meeting and all this.
Have some lunch? Where did you get that idea from?
Just go on mute like that.
How do you feel when it's like that, when it's back to back?
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Because by the end,
when am I going to do my actual work?
Exactly, because there is a point where you go through that series of that meeting, and then it's
Do you
right,
think,
work
I
starts
don't want
now.
to turn this into a
So-
therapy session, but do you think that it's because you're not necessarily in the same place? Whereas if you're in the same place, you have a 3-minute conversation. If it's on Teams, you have, or Zoom, you have a half-hour scheduled conversation and you fill it. I mean, I just wonder, I just feel like, how does it add up? I just don't understand how we get such full calendars.
I think the look and feel of a place is really quite important, and that can be achieved in fairly simple ways. The Berkshire Hospital in Reading, they had this tax office blue colour on the walls.
Lovely.
Lovely. Just the simple thing of having local artists come in and display their artwork. And people say, you go to a hospital visit, you're not in the best of moods probably, but it just gives a little lift. And I think the other important thing is the impact from COVID was people who had gardens and balconies, quite small green spaces, realised the value that this had. And the work now in research in the greenery area on nature, if we disconnect ourselves from nature, there is trouble. The connection with nature is so important. Nature is like a master connector. It brings you together and can, very simple ways you can lift the mood. And if your mood is more positive, you're in a better position to do your work and so on.
So how would that work in your back-to-back day? How do we do this when we've become habitually putting in the hour and it's gone Zoom or video call?
But while you're dashing from one place to the next, if you were dashing through places with nice overarching plans, or some artwork on the wall.
Decent architecture. Not nature, but I mean, it's got something to say.
But I think when you this is interesting, you talk about connection with nature, and I completely agree. But there's just in that subject alone, there's a whole sliding scale of, just having a plant in this room is one thing, but then you could go all the way to I'm actually gardening, and you've got everything in between. So you've actually got that activity of doing something, you're creating, you're aware of nature. But as you say, that sort of trip from one side of London to the other that people used to have, or they're having much less of because of the way technology's gone. You
could argue that external air has something to do with nature. I mean, I know it doesn't always feel like that in London, but it
But there's times when it's just being cognizant of the outside, natural light,
different focal lengths, things like
exactly,
that.
So I think those are some of the opportunities that we can have within our workplaces.
I'm aware we're scheduled for a comfort break, and a comfort and thinking about that, we'll go out, look at different focal lengths, different things. I would like to just kind of follow on a bit from nature. We haven't really talked about sustainability at all, so let's just talk about those materials in the workplace, and then we'll carry on with what we're going to do. Great.
That's good.